used by the community. Really, the market analysis portion, I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute, is really set up in a way that it can help employers, it can help parents, help the community as a whole, just to see where the challenges are and what to do going forward. There's also a lot of good information in there that can help childcare programs, childcare providers, programs that might be interested in becoming a childcare provider in Storm Lake to really figure out how to operate their business. What are the needs and the demands of the community? So I'm going to dig right in then. I think most of you have a handout there today. So the overall population of that zip code area and the number of children have increased. So as of 2021, which is the most recent available data at the time we did our research, there were just over 2,301 children ages 0 to 11 living in that zip code. Now we know all of them are not going to use childcare, and so we have our method of calculation at the end then. First Choice Finance is estimating about 1,251 are likely to use an HHS regulated childcare environment if it was available, they could find a space. Throughout the county, the couple next data points are only available on the county level through Iowa Workforce Development. But countywide, the largest industry is manufacturing as far as the number of employees. And the average weekly wages are about $970. So just to kind of have a context of how much families are earning. And then over the last 5 years, looking at the county as a whole, there has been a slight increase in the number of total regulated childcare spaces available. Obviously, as you know, those are outside of Storm Lake, so maybe isn't helping locally, but good to just sort of note there has been some growth. There was an increase of 77 spaces over a 5-year period. And that data is also important to note. That's as of October 2023 when the market data was originally put together. So I'm going to share with you next the child care market analysis key findings. And the handout you have, this is kind of where that picks up. And we're going to go through these 8 findings, and I'm going to share with you what I can about each data point. So finding number 1 is that the percentage of families with all parents in the labor force that also have children is declining. And so as you look at the two the graphics on the screen there, on the left-hand side, there are 3 bars that represent families that have children ages 0 to 5, and all parents are in the labor force. So the blue is 2011. You see a little decline there to 2016 and another decline to 2021. So as far as families that both have children and the parents are all working, there has been a decline in that percentage. Families with older children, school age, ages 6 to 17 is the other grouping that the U.S. Census Bureau uses. There has not been quite as drastic of a change, but there has still been a decline in the percentage of families that have all parents in the workforce. Number 2, this comes from our parent surveys that went out last fall, that parents want regulated childcare that's available full-time and year-round. So the chart shows a list of options parents were given. If the following were all available, which would you most prefer if you were selecting childcare today? And so what we see there is that current parents, and those are people that have children today, ages 0 to 12, that 66% of those parents want to use a licensed childcare center. The other group that participated were called future parents. Those are individuals who do not have children today, but said they do plan to have or adopt children in the next 5 years. And among that group, 76%, they said their most preferred setting is a licensed center. Following that, then for the current parents, it goes to a regulated home, while future parents go to wanting to use a relative. So a little bit of split there for a second largest group. But overall, when we look at the first 2, the HHS licensed center and HH registered homes, those are all the regulated types of childcare settings. The others would be what we call like a friend and family or neighbor care. And so those would not have regulations or any sort of oversight to what they're doing with their operations. A little bit more detail of the most preferred, choices of parents. So overall, if I go through and pick the most popular responses of different amenities or within childcare, licensed center was the most preferred setting. As far as dropping off their children, from the hour of 7 a.m. to 7:59 a.m. was the most preferred. Picking children up in the evening, 5 to 5:59 p.m. was the most preferred. And by the way, they were given 24 hours, so every hour for a 24-hour period that they could select. Very few chose what would be second or third shift type of drop-off and pickup times. Monday through Friday, between 97 and 99% of all parents said yes, Monday through Friday. There were a few that had said they would maybe use a Saturday or Sunday, but very few. Year-round for ages 0 to 5, that was 75% of the parents said they needed it year-round versus school year only or summertime only. Now, when it comes to parents that have children 5 to 12, they were a little bit more split. 40% still said yes year-round, while 44% said summer only. There are very few parents that said school year only. So that's kind of the breakdown of time and uses and the preferences for childcare. Number 3 finding really has to do with quality of care. There were a lot of parents that were concerned with the quality of some of the options that were currently available in the community. So parents were asked to rate the quality of childcare on a scale of 1 to 5. 5 meant low quality, 3 was just quality or average, and 5 is high quality. So you can see on the chart, the 2 top lines are blue. The current parents rate the overall quality that what's available today is 2.78, and future parents perceive it as 1.94. I also put employers and childcare providers on this chart. They were asked the exact same question, just so you could get a comparison. Everybody's pretty much in alignment with each other, but none of the groups really hit that average quality mark. And so then with these questions, there were, throughout the survey, there were many opportunities for just open-ended comments and questions. So some of the comments related to quality that came from the parents specifically. One said hardly, and was any of the child care providers are registered. One said she has too many kids at a time. Very simply, the availability of high-quality child care in Storm Lake is the biggest challenge. Finding a reliable, but most importantly, safe child care. And that was in a question we asked, what do you think is the biggest challenge? That's kind of why that's in parentheses. And the same question, what do you think the biggest challenge is? Quality care in a clean, safe environment. Finding number 4, there's a shortage of childcare spaces among all age groups. And this is where I usually say, you knew that, you would have called. It's kind of like the mayor said, there's a problem, but sometimes you need help quantifying it or getting enough background information and data that you can help yourselves move forward. So this chart on the screen is broken down. I'm going to explain it a little bit, and then I'll talk about the numbers. On the left-hand side, you see age groups, 0 to 2 years old, 3 to 4 years old, and 5 to 11 years old. And those are kind of grouped, a combination of how the Census Bureau breaks down age groups for data, and they also somewhat align with the way some of the Iowa Department of Health and Human Services regulations work as far as staff to child ratio supervision in a child care center. So they're kind of the closest we can get that makes sense. So the blue bar on the top is the number of children that First Children's Finance is estimating are likely to use HHS regulated childcare if it was available. The kind of orangey yellow in the middle shows the number of regulated childcare spaces in Storm Lake that are currently already available during the school year. And there's a very tiny little green bar under each one that shows the HHS regulated spaces that are available during the summer. So you do have a total of 304 regulated spaces. However, almost all of those shut down during the summer for different reasons, just the type of programming that is offered through those. And then in the summer, what happens is there's just 1 or 2 registered homes available. There's no actual licensed centers. And so I'm going to jump ahead of this next slide to really show you the actual numbers. And again, you see this is broken down by the age groups. How many children have been estimated to be likely to use regulated care if it was available? Then that middle section has how many spaces are available during the school year, and then what that means for a gap. So for the age 0 to 2 line, I'll go through that and you can kind of look through the rest then. We estimate there's 248 children that would be likely to use care. For that age group during the school year, there's about 56 spaces available. And that's the best estimation we can do. Home providers have some flexibility depending on how many children they have at a time, what ages they are. So the closest we could estimate, about 56. So it leaves a gap of 192 spaces during the school year. But in the summer, when a few of those programs don't operate anymore, we drop down to only 8 spaces being available, and now the gap is about 240. Again, if it was all regulated care. So bottom line there, 1,251 children likely to use childcare. We've got 304 spaces total, but year-round, only 32 of them are available. So the gap could be as high as 1,227 spaces. And this is where I do my big disclaimer. You do not need to run out and try to build 1,227 spaces. Not all families are going to use childcare full-time or at the same time, but it does help start to get an idea of what might be needed. And also just kind of scaling up. As you address this, if you try to do all of that at once, you're gonna run into different challenges with finding enough people to work at a childcare program and just families getting moved over. So it's a slow process, but the message here is you need a lot of spaces, but you don't necessarily need a full 1,000 right away. Finding number 5, we asked parents several questions about childcare challenges and how it was impacting their employment or their job. And so on the chart up here are the kind of the top, anything that had 25% or more, 30% or more, parents said, yep, I've experienced that. So the number 1 challenge parents have experienced is they've missed at least 1 day of work in the last 12 months because their current childcare provider did not have room or space for their child. And that was experienced by 79% of the parents. 75% of parents that did the survey said they had to leave work early, 53% said they had to arrive late, and from there it goes down to unable to work overtime. They had to supervise a child while they were working from home, and some even had to reduce the hours that they worked, versus what they would prefer to work. There were some separate questions where I asked parents even questions like, have they or their spouse or partner had to quit their job in the last 12 months? Have they withdrawn from the labor force? Are they maybe what we would consider underemployed? Again, maybe not working the same industry that they have training for. So there were some participants who had those things as well. There were 22% said that they had declined or withdrawn from the labor force in the last 12 months. So not quite as high where it's on this chart, but another pretty significant number of people saying that impacted me. And so one of the others is that childcare is actually limiting employment. So this is a little bit different data point here. 46% of parents said that they're, again, it's them or their spouse or partner, if that is their situation, is currently limited in their employment. And so the bullets down below are some actual comments from the parents. Again, we asked them to explain. One said, I'm unable to work late or extra hours. One of them, a partner desperately wants at least a part-time job, desires full-time employment, but unable to due to lack of childcare. Once my maternity leave is over, I will have to work part-time from home until a spot opens at a daycare in a center in a nearby town, and can only work a few mornings a week due to limited daycare. And I'm gonna keep going on that. Similar, we asked employers pretty much the same questions to get their input on this. So as far as employers' response, that finding number 7 is that employers indicate employees are missing work due to childcare challenges. And this was asked a couple different ways in different questions. But overall, 74% of the employers that participated in the survey said yes, their business has experienced challenges related to absenteeism due to employees' childcare challenges. And so 100% of the employers said yes, they had employees leave work early because of childcare challenges. 93% of employers said yes, they had employees arrive late. And 80% of employers said yes, we have employees who had to miss a day of work when their childcare provider is closed, on vacation, or not available. So employers are feeling it just as much as the parents are. And the final finding was about childcare providers. There are several programs out there that are available for childcare providers, licensed centers, registered homes, and in some cases, even non-registered homes could participate. And they were given a couple of different lists. All of the programs are related to things that would provide funding directly to their childcare program. They may provide sort of a service or access to use services that might reduce their overhead costs or their operating costs. So there were a few that we picked out that were really kind of key that we were surprised about. And so the finding is that childcare providers indicate they are not utilizing opportunities that may improve their business operations. And so on this slide, I have just a chart breaking down, and I'm gonna go to another slide here just in a second to give a little bit more details about each of these. So kind of what I want you to note here is looking at that column that says current or past participant, that very few programs said yes, we're current or past. Now granted, there were not a lot that necessarily are eligible. So I also want to take a look at that middle column. I'm aware of this, but I haven't ever participated. So kind of a mixture out of the 5 total programs that responded, not a lot that had said, yeah, we're using that. Some that said we're aware, and really quite, kind of equal then, no, I'm not familiar with that, or I've never heard of it. So just to kind of give an idea of what these are, the first one on that list was called TEACH, and it's Early Childhood Iowa. And it's not complicated, but there are multiple options within this program that essentially, if you have to boil it down to one sentence, it provides compensation and scholarship funds to childcare workers, so childcare center staff, or it could be a home provider that want to work on furthering their education. And so there's more to it than that, but there's some different things, and there's some data with that show that once a participant uses this scholarship program and they have improved their education, that there are other things that can help them earn more money. And some of them, they just get paid more overall because the quality of the childcare program is a little bit higher. Some of them are then become eligible for the second bullet, which is called Childcare Wages Iowa. And that's a salary supplement program that provides a stipend directly to childcare staff. It's again, staff in a licensed center, or it could be a home provider that meets the right qualifications. And this is a program that's been available in Iowa for some time, but since COVID, the state legislature has started funding it to apply to every county in Iowa. It did not used to apply everywhere. It was sort of, did your county put in money, then your local childcare programs are eligible. So this is a little bit, it's not a new program, but more access across the state of Iowa. The third one is just a cost savings. Field print fingerprinting is now available, essentially a child care program when they have to do the required background checks and do fingerprinting on their staff, could do so through this program at no cost. So this is a way to help them reduce costs. Child care management software. There are a lot of programs out there, but right now, through the state of Iowa, there are a couple of specific programs that are being funded, so the fees are paid. A child care program could use this at no cost for a period of time, and it would help reduce staff hours and their overhead costs because it just would make things more efficient. You don't have somebody writing out, pencil, paper, staff schedules and child schedules, so it could help with some of those things. And then the Child Care Assistance Pilot Program is new as of July 2023, and you maybe have heard a little bit about this in the news where child care staff, it keeps getting promoted as they get free tuition. So this is the program that would allow child care workers to have the income eligibility waived that might allow them to access that to have their tuition paid for. So just kind of another way that child care programs might help with attracting and retaining staff, reducing costs, and even bringing in a little bit extra income in some cases. The vision statement that they came up with is Sustainable investments made in quality childcare options will benefit the children, families, and employers of Storm Lake. So that's kind of the guiding statement there for this. Throughout the process, 2 goals were developed, and I'm going to share each of those with you and the strategies that were developed to help reach each of those goals. Again, I'm not going to get into a lot of details, but keeping in mind each of the, overall this is a 5-year plan. So for each strategy, we also have year-by-year action steps. Here's what's going to happen year 1, year 2. Here's who's going to do it. Is it going to be the Child Care Steering Committee, or will a subcommittee take that on, or is there another entity in the community? So goal 1 is to engage local employers and other community partners in childcare solutions. The committee recognized right away that this is not a one small group sort of thing. This is going to take all hands on board. So strategy number 1 is to establish the Storm Lake Child Care Steering Committee. It's going to sort of implement and oversee this plan. We did have a committee do the strategic planning process, but want to be sure going forward there is a set committee that primarily will review the strategic plan on an annual basis, can call on partners or maybe form a subcommittee. Hey, we said we're going to do this. Let's get a subcommittee appointed and ask them to do these action steps within this time frame. So that's going to be their primary role going forward. Strategy 2 is to inform employers and other community partners about recent childcare efforts, including the childcare market analysis to begin engagement and support the implementation of this strategic plan for childcare. So guess what? You're all part of this strategy today. This is kind of the kickoff. So starting out with this community presentation and city council session is really the first step. Part of that also goes back to the question we had before, where can we find these reports? The city will have those on their website so that they will be accessible to the community going forward. And then really is partly the steering committee sort of keeping an eye on the progress over time to determine are there some of these strategies that have been completed? Is there a success story we can share? So that will be kind of some of the steps under strategy number 2 of keeping the community and employers and other local groups informed. Goal 1 continued. Here's strategy 3. It's provide resources and information about childcare related employee benefits, childcare partnerships, and employer-sponsored childcare models to local employers. So we talked a lot about ways that employers could be involved, and not just employers, but community organizations and groups throughout the community, and even different ideas and examples. So the Child Care Steering Committee is going to work on that. Kind of one of the first and foremost things on the list of different things is just to be sure everyone knows where to find childcare information. When I go into community, it's often tempting to say, oh, we should put a page on the city website and list all the childcare providers in town. Really, the answer to that is you have childcare resource referral working within your region. And so number 1 thing on this list is to just be sure employers know that if employees come and ask for information, here's where to go. It's called resource and referral is that parent resource and referral is part of that. So, and also making sure, like as mentioned here, of just sharing what information they can about things like dependent care flex spending accounts. Is your company offering that to your employees? If not, could you? And looking into other ways that employers might choose to help employees access tuition, whether that's through information or possibly funding, whatever that might look like. Strategy 4, provide parents access to information that would assist them in understanding, identifying, and choosing childcare. And again, this goes back to using the resources that are already available without reinventing the wheel, but making sure the community organizations and sites are directing parents to that child care resource and referral website. A couple of things that they can find on there is even how to identify quality care, and there's a list of questions to ask. As you're looking at child care providers, here's what to look for. What kind of questions should you ask a child care provider when you go into their home or take a look at that? So taking that information, getting it out throughout the community and to parents. And they have some great ideas on different ways to reach out through employers and organizations even. And goal 2 then is the big one. This is kind of the meat of why we're here, right? It's really to increase the spaces. So increase the number of regulated childcare spaces that are available year-round from 30 to at least 166 by 2029. And so kind of as we do this, it's really hard to put a number on that. We want to be as specific as possible. Those of you that maybe are familiar with the term SMART goals, that's the acronym we use when we do the goal setting. I've seen some heads nod. So we really wanted to be as specific as we could, and we talked through each of these strategies and said, okay, what's possible? What's realistic? What might happen? So the first strategy is to increase the number of spaces within registered child development homes. We all know that a center is like a top thing, but there still are families that want to use a home as well. So this is where we started our conversation, and really to look at over the next 5 years or so, if it's possible to get at least 2, that was kind of the target, 2 more registered homes within the community. And so there are steps broken out on how that might happen. Number 2 strategy there is to establish a new licensed center that's licensed to serve a minimum of 150 children. So that's kind of, those are the 2 big ones on how we get new spaces. So this is really starting out in an investigative sort of level. I know this has been talked about in the community a lot, but finding out first just sort of what's it going to take if we were to go for about 150 children. And really doing the planning process of step 1 here, right, a business plan. Step 2, now let's find a site. Step 3, let's do a capital campaign plan. So, and I may not have said those in the exact correct order right now, looking up, down. But you get the idea that there's steps laid out and it assigns responsibility. Who's going to do this? And at what point the committee might hand it off to an entity that already is in the childcare business, childcare world, that wants to open up a center in the community, or at what point they may go forward and start a new nonprofit board of directors and hand it off to that business entity. So there's some definition there on at what point it becomes an actual business versus the local committee exploring and trying to lay the groundwork for a new center. Strategy 3 then is talking with the local schools about the spaces they already have licensed through HHS to determine the feasibility of utilizing those spaces year-round. So I mentioned earlier there's quite a substantial number of childcare spaces that are available during the school year but are not during the summer months. And those are primarily through school districts, both Storm Lake Community and St. Mary's, as well as Head Start. So kind of looking, are there any options, whether those entities would consider operating year-round, or if they would consider letting another entity utilize those spaces during the summer months so we can have some summer school-age programming. So there's a couple different routes that could go, and again, it's sort of determine what's feasible. We're not promising it's going to happen, but encouraging that those conversations do happen to see what might be possible. Strategy 4 is establishing a peer networking group for home-based childcare providers. So there was a lot of talk about how there's a couple of really great registered or recently retired, previously registered home providers in the community. And sometimes there's barriers that just need to be overcome. So giving providers a safe space to talk to each other, to encourage them to learn, maybe at least improve practices if there needs to be, if not, to hopefully move to that full-blown registration. So this may be one way that strategy 1 actually takes place to get those 2 new registered homes. And this is one that the committee really talked about being sort of introducing it and then stepping out and letting those providers work among themselves, that they kind of are going to need to have the leadership if they really want such a thing, but the idea was there, and so we wrote out some steps to have them help facilitate an initial convening and then let the providers take it on themselves if they wish to continue. And then strategy 5, promote existing classes for middle school and high school students that will care for children by babysitting or nannying, and for children that may be staying home alone. And this is one I've heard a couple communities talk about. First, I'm kind of like, oh no, that's not my job. Like, I'm supposed to be here telling you to build a new center and regulate it. But our conversations with your group is the reality is kids are staying home alone. high school students are watching younger students. So I know some research was done, some phone calls are made. There are some classes available locally, primarily through Extension. I think there's some online courses through Red Cross as well. So just promoting that if this is the last resort, because the supply isn't there. So if those children will be home alone, or a high school age or middle school age student will be watching younger children, at least give them some basic safety and first aid and kind of some of the rules of how to be alone or watching other children, to make it as safe as environment as we can until you can grow that supply other ways. And I'm gonna pause here.